And we're live. This is the No Delusion Zone. I am David Debato, and I'm very excited today to have as my very special guest, Adam Dunigan. Adam, and I'm going to put his photo up here, and he will be speaking shortly. Adam is a Democrat running for Congress in Virginia's 8th Congressional District. He is a former CIA case officer. He's also a former Marine. And before I go on any more about Adam and his accomplishments, I'm going to play a very brief clip from the start of his campaign. So if you all just hang tight, let Adam introduce himself in his own words.
Hi, I'm Adam Dunigan, former Marine, ex-CIA, currently running for Congress in Virginia's 8th District, because there's no expiration date on serving your country. And I'm actually here to ask for your help. I walked away from my career at CIA because I could no longer support Trump's authoritarian project. I walked away from my career because I actually believe in bringing accountability back to government. I want accountability for the criminals at Doge who destroyed the livelihoods of our federal families. I walked away because I want accountability for the billionaires profiting from naked corruption in Washington. I want to see accountability for the politicians who stayed silent and let this all happen under their watch. I'm trying to build something different in my campaign. An insurgent campaign. Only relying on small dollar donations, and that's only accountable to you and not the permanent political class in Washington. So, if you want to see a new kind of Democrat, I'm trying to raise $60,000 by March 16th. $5, $10, $20, anything goes a long way to helping my team. Because here's the real promise. I will never take corporate PAC money, and I will never take special interest money. Our donation link is below. Please share our message onward, and thank you for listening. See you out there.
And that is you, and that is Adam Dunigan. Without further ado, Adam, welcome to the No Delusion Zone.
Thank you, David. I'm happy to be here. It's always weird seeing myself on screen like this. Still
I'm sure it is. Well, get used to it because you're going to be seeing a lot of yourself. I hope you're seeing a lot of yourself. The one thing I have to ask right off the top, and I think it's especially relevant for you, and I'll just put the question right up here, and this has to do with the current Trump administration.
Yeah,
you know, I couldn't say it any better. I'm going to say a lot of things that you can't say or shouldn't say. So, because this is the No Delusion Zone, and I really don't care what MAGA thinks or even what YouTube thinks, as long as I don't get banned. But in any event, I want to ask you. Look, I've put out videos, and I think, in fact, I sent you one that I really strongly believe in. In all seriousness. One of the things that I believe very, very earnestly, very strongly about why the Democrats haven't done better than they have, and that they're not going to do better unless they start communicating with the average American, until they start getting away or focusing on fringe topics. Not that they're not important, they are, but they're called fringe topics for a reason. They only apply to a fringe, a smaller amount of Americans. Democrats need to start relating to the average American, people that think about putting a roof over their head, think about putting food on the table, think about paying their rent or their mortgage, putting clothes on their children's backs, and so forth and so on. So let me ask you this at the very top. What are the three things that Democrats must do to regain the confidence of voters?
Yeah, this is a question that core of that question is what put me in politics to begin with. I took a look around and I realized that fundamentally Democrats were not just missing the moment, just they were outside of the conversation entirely that the rest of America were having, at least the national party, right? I was never part of this milieu, so I wasn't here in the Virginia party. I was overseas for most of my career, so I wasn't part of it. So the three things that I saw that they weren't doing, that I think are low hanging fruit to start rebuilding trust in the electorate. One is, as you heard in my ad, we have to break the influence of big corporate money on politics. The idea of politicians as bought and paid for by major corporations, that's killing trust. And unfortunately, right or wrong, the perception is that all politicians are bought to a certain extent. That's the benefit of a candidacy like mine coming in, is I'm coming in clean. Well, not quite clean. Everybody has different associations with my background, but I'm coming in from organizations and in a life of service that isn't tied to corporate profits or donors or anything like that. So coming in clean, keeping clean ethically in finance in office is one big part of that. The second thing you got to do is, yeah, you have to meet people where they are, and where people are right now is in a pretty bad place. If you're still talking about identity politics as a Democrat, I understand the impulse, and I understand there's a nobility in trying to protect and platform, minority groups and vulnerable groups. But right now, people can't pay their bills. Right now, kids are afraid of getting drafted. Right now, everyone's afraid of AI taking their jobs. There are major issues that need triage in this country that the Democrats have not been focusing on for a while now. And we're just giving the conversation away to corporations who do buy politicians on their behalf to attenuate focus on those issues in favor of identity issues that keep us divided. So that's a big part of it. And then the third thing is you have to have consequences. In my ad that you just played, you hear the concept of accountability. What accountability really means is consequence. If you break the law, if you violate the Constitution, you got to go to jail. Like that's the foundational thing in this country that sets us apart from banana republics, dictatorships. Is we have rule of law, we have respect for it. Our country was founded on this idea of respect for a common vision, and rule of law is fundamental within that. And we've gotten away from it. You have the 22-year-old kids from Doge that clearly had no idea what they were doing and ruined thousands of families and careers. You have the Department of Justice right now, which is clearly partisan, and prosecuting political enemies at the expense of pursuing people who broke the law, or in the case of the Epstein files, harmed children sexually, and there's been no consequence for it. So that's my three. I realize I'm long-winded on this, but yeah, essentially you got to break the corporate money influence. You have to have consequences back in government. Rule of law has to be restored, and you have to have the conversation and that people actually care about, and get away from these identity politics issues that have not only divided this country, but also divided us within the party. Those are my three.
No, I think they're great. And I of course, agree with you. A follow-up question that's, obvious and is related to what you just said. What are the worst three things that the Democrats have done to alienate the average American and perhaps drive them into the clutches or the arms of MAGA?
Um, oh man, this is a big one. In my opinion, this is just mine, because there's a lot of missteps in recent Democratic Party history that I could point to. One big part is not making sure that the candidates that are elevated reflect the electorate that they represent. We have, in several races around the country, pushed candidates that were, pushing 80 years old and had been in office for forever, when it was very clear that people were hungry for some sort of change, some indicator that the party was evolving along with them, and able to wield the power that we fight so hard to get. We miss that a bunch, and I got specific examples I can go into, but we all feel it, we all know it, right? The party has not made sure to validate and reflect the perspective of the voters that they're asking support from. And at the same time, the second thing is we scold. There's this purity testing mentality within the Democratic Party, especially on identity issues, that even people within those minority or identity groups, trans people is a great example. Trans people, trans rights are human rights. I fully agree. And you know what most trans people want is to stop being used as a mascot by both political parties for whatever sort of social division that they're currently blaming all the world's ills on. They want to be treated like Americans, just like anybody else. And I think if the Democrats can get back to that kind of mentality, that, like, I don't care what color you are, what you believe, what gender identity you wanna put on your passport, as long as you're treated like an American with all the civil liberties associated with that, I think that's a good starting point for the future of this country, where we go from here.
Well,
And then, sorry, please.
no, I'm sorry. No, go ahead, please, please.
I say, and then the third thing that we've done is, we have taunted the right. And not to say that I don't love Gavin Newsom's Trump imitation, the trolley stuff that he does online. It can be entertaining, but there's a moment right now, especially in the wake of the war with Iran, where we have a window to bring some even MAGA fringe back to sanity, to give them somebody on the left that they can respect and hear this message from, because they are so freaked out by the excesses of this administration. And if we use that moment to taunt or scold them or say, I told you so, we are going to lose those voters forever. And if we don't get them back right now, I do worry about the future.
I'm going to come back to that point about talking to MAGA in just a moment, but I want to ask you, as you know, the Democrats used to be the party of the average American, of the blue collar Americans, going back at least to FDR. They epitomized what the average American thought, what they felt, and they reached out to them. And for most of the 20th century until actually fairly recently, they had the vote of middle America, of the average working American, especially those that worked in factories when we still had factories and manufacturing. So let me follow up to what you just said. Why did they get away from that? Why are they doing what you just said? Actually, looking down their nose, not all, but looking down their nose at average Americans, being elitists, concentrating on fringe topics to the detriment of their own party by not focusing again. And we're batting this around, but not focusing on what the average American wants. When and why did they get away from their core message and start losing their core constituencies? What happened?
I think the Obama era kind of broke the brains of Democratic strategists and senior members in the party because there's plenty of criticisms to be leveled at every presidency, Obama's included, but there was a certain resting on laurels mentality that happened after two consecutive terms with the Democratic president, and then Hillary Clinton's run up to the first Trump administration. There was this baseline assumption that we had won the argument, that we didn't have to go out and do the work and make sure to instill trust within the voters, because how could they not trust us? Look at this crazy guy coming in here. And within this very navel-gazy circle at the senior levels of the National Democratic Party, nobody considered the fact that they were no longer speaking to the electorate because they didn't feel like they had to. Most donors in the Democratic Party, the mega donors, the corporations that put in for national Democratic candidates, they're not talking to middle America. They never even hear it. It's very, very circular. It's the Ouroboros, right? It's the self-eating snake. And then everyone is shocked when middle America elects somebody like Trump, because he's the only one that's there. He's the one looking them in the eye and telling them what they want to hear. Now, you and I know that it's all lies, that it's facsimile of authenticity, but it still feels more real than what they're getting from their actual elected officials within the Democratic Party. It's just true. And I think that's an advantage that somebody like me or candidates like me coming in fresh, rather than from these political pipelines that are gilded by those same donors, we retain that authenticity, and we're just as pissed off as those voters. And I think that's an asset right now.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I'm still bewildered as to why they went off their message, but they did. And they need to bring it back. Let me circle back, though, to what you had talked about and what I talk about a lot. I'll be honest with you. It's very difficult for me to talk to most Trump supporters, most MAGA supporters. I have tried. Lord knows I have tried for years. And it's very, very difficult. So let me just flat out ask you, Adam, how can you or any Democrat reach out to Trump supporters, to MAGA, diehard MAGA supporters, Trump supporters right now? What should you say to reach out to them and to try to just get into a conversation where they listen to you and perhaps see what you're talking about and consider what the Republicans have been doing and are doing? How do you do that? What's your plan to reach out to MAGA? And should you?
You definitely should. I don't think we have the luxury in this country of pretending like 40% of the electorate just doesn't exist anymore. That mentality got us the first Trump term. It got us the second Trump term. So you definitely do have to reach out. And how do you do it? I don't have the perfect answer for that, but I do know where that answer starts. And it has to start from a position of authority or mutual respect. It's real hard to make the MAGA crowd respect anybody with Democrat next to their name. But I'll tell you, I'm out there on the pavement every day, shaking hands and doing the political thing. And when I meet Republicans or MAGA type voters, we can get 75% of the way through a conversation about what's wrong with this country before they even realize I'm a Democrat, because I was in the Marine Corps, because I got the Republican haircut. Because I'm their idea of what a Republican politician would be. I can penetrate with liberal or progressive talking points in a conversation a lot further than, let's say, an activist type candidate or somebody coming at it from a minority population or identity issue approach. I think that's important right now, and we have to be real acerbic. We have to look at this as realpolitik, right? We need to be putting forward the kind of people who can bridge that gap. I think military, I think service in general, like a federal service in general, goes a long way towards establishing credibility and putting that credibility forward and talking through issues in a language that they can understand within, the news context that they have heard these issues before. If you can break through that, and I have had some success in doing it, I think most America lives right in the middle of the spectrum, and we just need to find each other again. I want to be. I think I am the kind of guy that can talk us through that.
I agree. Again, I agree. I don't know why the Democrats don't get that message, and why, in many instances, not in all, they keep putting forward very radical, I'm sorry, progressive candidates, which in some districts, as you know, very popular, they win. But right now, where the country's at, that's not going to be the way to go for the future. We need centrist candidates. We need people like yourself, obviously, that have worked in intelligence, have been in the military, that can relate to the average American. Again, I don't know why the Democrats don't get that message, but in fact, I think, and I agree with you, I think we need to talk to MAGA. I'm sorry, you're right. Whether it's 30, 40, or whatever percentage of the population, of the voting population, they're Americans, and we need to talk to them. We can't just ignore them. I just want to put something out there for you, and for folks listening. I am a strong believer in town hall meetings, where in person, Zoom if you have to, but in person, where you speak, where the candidates speak, left, right, center, Republican, Democrat, and hash out these issues. I have offered, and I'll offer again, depending on where you're at in the race in a little while. I would love to host or be a mediator, whatever you want to call it, of town halls, where we have Democrat and Republican candidates hashing out the issues prior, of course, to November. I think that's the only way the Democrats are going to come out of this on top, and hopefully pull in enough of the Republicans, enough of the MAGA Trump supporters, to bring the Democratic Party back as a viable party. So again, I just want to throw that out there. I can't stress enough how much I believe in town halls.
I'm with you on this. I have to say that if you want the best litmus test of who somebody is going to be in office, go look at them public speaking, and not just giving a speech, but speaking to public. These town halls where you ask a question off the cuff, unprepared answer, see how they roll with that. And there's plenty of examples on both sides of the aisles of politicians who are clearly fundamentally not prepared on the issues they're claiming to govern on, and they're relying on prepared policy from think tanks or sometimes donors or staff. I would like to go back to a time of that, like, philosopher politician like we had in the founding fathers, that have some subject matter expertise on the things they're governing on, and if they don't, are at least humble enough to admit that and can still explain their basic positions and justify their values within those positions to the public. You have a responsibility to do it as an elected official.
Absolutely. And I'll throw it out there and then I'll move on, of course. If you can put together or think about putting together such a town hall, I would, again, be willing to host it, not through just this platform, but the other platforms that I'm a part of that have hundreds of thousands of subscribers. And we would be more than happy to host a town hall with yourself, Republican candidates in Virginia, of course, and talk about the issues. So if that's something you think
challenge
that you could
accepted,
do,
David. Yeah, hell yeah, sign me up.
well, put it together and
Yes, sir.
get back to me afterwards. Okay,
Will do.
let's talk about getting back to Virginia. Of course, you're the candidate in the 8th congressional district. Right now, Virginia's going through the redistricting question that some would call, of course, gerrymandering. Where do you come down on that? Are you for it? Are you against it? And why?
I will bite the bullet on this. I am for it hesitantly. I voted yes already, early voting. If you're in Virginia, I do believe you should vote yes, but we should all feel bad about it. There's no two ways about it. It's gerrymandering. Extraordinary circumstances in Washington require extraordinary action here. It is technically legal. Whether it's ethical or moral within that legal framework, that's not for me to say. What I will say is, if we don't do it, if we decide to be principled Democrats and stand on our values and try to win the argument and not win on technicality, I get it. I want that too, personally, like emotionally. But the realpolitik part of my brain realizes, if we miss the majority in Congress by just a couple seats when it comes November, it is going to be another example of us having the ability to wield power and refusing to do so. And that has harmed this country irreparably in the past. For prosecutions after Trump's first term come to mind on this. We cannot afford to keep making these hesitant missteps, and that will be Democrats' brand unless we prove people wrong. Now, Governor Spanberger has asked for a lot of trust. This is a big political gamble, obviously, but I do think that the governor has the trust of the people. She has my trust anyway, that this is truly a temporary measure that will be reverted, and we will go back to a nonpartisan or bipartisan redistricting effort after this and reset the scale. But right now, we have to take action, and this is a legally available option that if we don't take, will be a mistake.
You know, I realize that those that are against it are saying, look, this is tit for tat. How long is this going to go on? Yes, we agree that the Republicans started it. Probably, I think it was in Texas, and then California got involved, and now, of course, states like Virginia are doing the same thing. But I'm not for gerrymandering. First of all, I agree with that. However, I think the main thing here is the Democrats got to win. If the Republicans continue to control the House, continue to control the Congress, House and Senate, I think the game's kind of over. So the first thing should be, the goal should be to win. And if that means that you have to do some, I hate to say it again, gerrymandering, redistricting, okay, if you don't win, you can't roll it back because obviously you're not in power. So I'll just go with that. I'm not in Virginia, so I know it's a very contentious topic. I don't know how it's going to turn out, but for right now, I believe it has to be done because I may be mistaken, Adam. If it's successful, this will probably add more one or more seats, Democratic seats. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the Virginia's current map for congressional districts, we have 6 out of the 11, so 6 for Democrats, 5 for Republicans, as currently drawn. The new map that is being voted on, and it is going to the people to vote on whether to accept this, would essentially redraw the districts such that Democrats get 10 to Republicans 1. That is to say, in these midterm elections, Democrats are likely or highly favored to win 10 of the 11 districts rather than just 6 of the 11. It's again, it feels gross. And if you look at these maps, I encourage everybody to do so. If you look at the map, you can look at my district, for example. There's a up through Arlington, Virginia, in the northwest or northeast. You'll see something that looks a lot like a lobster. It's this kind of like narrow triangle that goes into 2 claws, and it looks bad because it is bad. It's clearly a gerrymander, and it's clearly intentionally drawn to pull in as much rural community and offset those communities, which typically vote red, with Democrat votes from urban Arlington. Again, I understand why we're doing this, and I understand why people have hesitation. I also understand the Republican messaging around this, where they're saying this is disenfranchisement, this is not fair. It's not. It really isn't. And I wish that the state party, and I wish the National Democratic Party would bite the bullet on that and validate this position. This kind of 1984 Orwellian doublespeak, where the yes campaign, vote yes, is saying, we're making elections fair again. No, you're not. You're absolutely not. We are doing the necessary to save this country, and we should understand the sacrifice that requires of people in these communities that we're drawing around. And if we don't validate that, we're going to lose them as voters. We'll never even have the shot at them. And unless we come back to the center as a country, it's going to harm us and continue the backslide of our democracy. That kind of community building or centrist identity building could start in campaigns just like this, but we're still trapped, at least at the National Democratic Party level, we're still trapped in these cycles of communication where we're just talking past each other.
That centrist message, I think, is the most important message that's got to get out there for the Democrats. Adam, Virginia's changing. I just want to stay with Virginia for just a bit. It's changing. It used to being, correct me if I'm wrong, more of a red state. It's definitely not anymore. What's brought about that change? Is it just the demographics? Is it just politics? Is it what's going on in Virginia that's changing it to more of a bluish state or a blue state?
I think, yeah, over the last 10 years, 15, 16 years, but if you go back to 2010, the Republicans actually, the Republicans actually gerrymandered the state themselves once upon a time in 2010. So this was a majority red state, and now we're a majority blue state. And I think
Right.
the big demographic shift on that has been influx of out-of-towners to come be part of the federal apparatus that lives, like my district, the 8th here in Arlington, Virginia. It's everybody's from everywhere, but they become Virginians. It's this kind of like real melting pot of America type area, and we're real proud of that too. And then the other part is that, yeah, the expansion of urban communities and academic communities around the state too. We're attracting talent, which is one of the great things about Virginia in general. My district here, we can have our criticisms of mega corporations, and we should, but everybody wants to come here. We're right across the river from where decisions get made. We're next to great natural resources. If you're trying to put together alternative green energy initiatives, or with some controversy data centers, we have the perfect landscape for it. We have it all here in the 95 corridor in Virginia, and that has attracted the kind of the business talent and academic talent and family demographics that will turn a state blue and keep it blue if we can keep them in the conversation and participating in good faith as Democrats. We have to make sure that we're meeting them where they are. And right now, they're being crunched by affordability. That's going to be the challenge for Democrats in Virginia going forward.
And I think Virginia's got the best mix going forward, in my humble opinion. We've got just what you said, which is the influx of people coming to the universities, to the corporations that are there. So they obviously bring their talents, their skills, their education, and their probably more liberal attitudes. However, you've got a great rural community too. You've got a lot of beauty, natural beauty, and farmland and so forth in Virginia. So you've got a mix there that if the Democrats can just hit that centrist tone in Virginia, I think it's going to be not even a purple state. It's going to be a blue state going forward, which it pretty much is. But I'll leave that up to you. I want to move on to something else here, which is really a pet peeve of mine. In your opinion, why haven't the House Democrats come out stronger against, well, many things, but specifically impeachment? I get it. I know that impeachment's not going to go anywhere right now in the House. And even if it does, it's going to die on the vine in the Senate. However, why haven't the Democrats made a stand and come out for impeachment against Pam Bondi, against Hegseth, of course, against Donald Trump? I mean, against all these these criminals, these lunatics. Why haven't they done that to at least show Americans that they understand what's going on, they've got a spine, and that they've got our backs? Why hasn't that happened?
I mean, the easy answer to that is laziness and cowardice, political convenience. Um, One thing that Democrats have fundamentally misunderstood that Republicans, in their really underhanded way, understood immediately was the power of symbolism, the power of
Mhm.
symbolic action, the perception of action, even. You remember when, after the ACA passed, right, Obamacare, Republicans sent what, 30, 40 different attempts to repeal it, knowing that it would all fail in the House or whatever. That was red meat to their voters to show that they were engaged, paying attention, and understood the stakes. It was bad. It's bad policy then. It's horrible policy what Trump's done to it since then. But you know what? Who feels validated in that equation is the voter they need to retain. So why haven't the Democrats supported impeachment for any of the lunatics at Department of War now, or
DHS,
the White
DOJ,
House, DHS,
FBI,
any of
any
them?
of those. Yeah.
Because they're cowards. They don't know if they can succeed, and that fear of failure, the fear of perception of failure, is enough to disincentivize them from moving forward. I think that is a shame, and it amounts to political cowardice. One thing that I think people really seem to like about me when I get into these rooms and I'm shaking hands and I'm telling them what I want to do, I don't fear that at all. I think the iterative power of failure teaches you things, and it provides reassurance to your voters that you care, that you're present, that you're in the room making the decisions, that you're showing up. And the one thing that people aren't talking about, and this applies to Republicans and Democrats, is that a big reason impeachment hasn't gone forward is because a lot of the members that need to be there physically in the room for something like this are not. They're not there for the votes. They're not there for the party meetings. They're not there for the quorums that they need to be for, because our Congress has been asleep at the wheel for a long time. And this is the entire reason I'm going to go kick the door in and wake them up, because we are overdue for a renewal of the energy in that chamber. And with that renewal comes a lot more action, just like you're talking about.
Well, one of the main things that Republicans, MAGA, Trump supporters especially, have against the libs is that what you just said, they're cowards. They're tree huggers. They don't have a spine. Why should we support them? They're not real Americans. And you know what? Even if they disagree with what we're talking about, impeachment or holding Republicans' feet to the fire, they would respect their courage. They would respect their grit. They would respect their stubbornness and all the things that Republicans do, which is to call out Democrats unjustifiably, in my opinion, but just show again that they've got a couple. That's what's missing in the Democratic Party. I'm sorry. It's what's missing. And it's what is driving people to MAGA and to stay there. Let me ask you. Go ahead.
If I can make a comment on that.
Absolutely.
I think another thing that the left in general, wherever you fall on the spectrum on the left, doesn't really understand is that there is a begrudging respect for just conviction in the average American voter. Just live your conviction. If you're the crazy online blue-haired communist that's screaming about it, as long as you're consistent in your beliefs, I don't know. I disagree. I don't think you should be in charge of anything, but man, I respect it. If you're one of these crazy white power militia guys out in the woods running around training for World War III, I really don't like your ideas, but man, you clearly believe in them. I wish I could have that kind of conviction behind something that was constructive to our society rather than destructive to our society. There's a certain respectability in somebody who declares their values and lives them. And what sucks about the right now is they have this perception of authenticity, but it's completely fake. This administration fakes that macho, jingoistic, wrap yourself in the flag really well, and people eat it up because they're stuck in these 24-hour news cycles. There's a million reasons, right? But as soon as they meet somebody like me or other candidates like me that are out here trying to do politics the right way, looking them in the eye, giving them a firm handshake, and maybe sometimes telling them that they're wrong, there's a respect for that. And they do not know that as a brand of the Democratic Party right now. I'm trying to change that.
God, do I hate hypocrisy? I think that little American flag handkerchief that Heggs wears in his pocket should be taken out and put his hands behind his back and tie his hands together. Zip tie with that damn handkerchief. I mean, talking about
it is a bit shocking to see the Secretary of Defense dressed like a WWE character, but that's
what's more shocking is something like this.
Jesus.
This is our Secretary of Defense. I will never call him Secretary of War. Is this lethality or just drunkenness? And of course, you can't forget his medieval knighthood. There is Knights of the Templar there. His
Dave's Volt, yeah. And I
mean, that's
I try not to talk trash about bad tattoos because I've gotten a couple in my day, but the boot camp M16 American flag, I don't know a single military member that doesn't see that and immediately wince when they're cringing so hard because they know exactly the kind of guy that gets those. And you know what? The policy that we've seen in this war in Iran is reflective of the kind of guy who gets those tattoos. Not a lot of forethought, even worse execution.
We can, and I've done whole episodes about Texit, so I'm not going to do it today. It's just not worth it. There's so much there. But talking about these lunatics, J.D. Vance just gave a talk at Turning Point, as I'm sure you're aware, to an almost empty house. But even then, he was heckled. And the thing I just want to bring up about that is he was talking to the people in the audience, and he was saying how to the young people, to the young Republicans, he was saying, I'm not saying you have to agree with me on every issue. What I am saying is don't disengage, because if you disagree with the administration just because you disagree with the administration on one topic, get more involved, make your voice heard even more, because that is how we ultimately take the country back. And my question is, Adam, take the country back from who?
Yeah, don't they have the country? Isn't that the point? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess my point is, of course, on this is that they believe, meaning the Republicans, the MAGA Republicans, they are actively in a civil war, that they are fighting against all Americans who disagree with them, which is the majority. So they're in an active daily fight to take the country back from Americans. It's sick and it's very dangerous.
Well, it shows you that their brains are just broken. They're so used to grievance politics I like to say that the MAGA wing of the Republican Party, but the Republican Party generally, they're the dog that caught the car, right? You know, it's running down the street, it's barking as loud as it can, it's puffing its chest up, and then the car stops and they have no idea what to do with it. That's governance for them. You know, they have no idea what to do as far as governance because they have spent their entire careers being grievance politics. I mean, JD Vance is a very specific example of this. He's the biggest AstroTurf candidate ever. He was funded by Peter Thiel coming out of Yale. He did his little minimum service in the Marine Corps, which I'm not going to knock service of, but it's, you know, it's a pretty obvious roadmap when you look at it. And it's an artificial influence on the political process to see a kid go from combat camera in the Marine Corps to an expensive law school, bankrolled by a billionaire, runs for public office, spends just 2 years in the Senate, and is now the vice president of the United States. Like, it's a pretty obvious pipeline where he was selected, gilded by the moneyed class. And unless you're paying real close attention, unless you know what to look for, the hallmarks of this kind of like king making that they do within financial circles, you'd miss it. And if you're looking at that event that he did at Turning Point USA, where that was like barely attended, and he's like kind of feebly begging kids not to leave the MAGA movement. This is why, because that kind of gilding, that kind of astroturfing of candidates, it can work in the short term, but it's not enough to actually inspire any sort of purpose or identity or sustain a movement. And that's what you're seeing fall apart right now. And I can't wait for it to continue.
One of the many things that bothers me about MAGA, of course, is the outright hypocrisy. I don't know why, when and if Trump supporters, Vance supporters, Republican supporters see videos of JD Vance of the not too distant past, just talking trash about Trump and saying how he can't be trusted, just some really horrible things about Donald Trump, period, that he should never be president, blah, 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 blah. And now he, of course, is a bootlicker. He's a full-fledged cult member. Why the average American, I don't care what your political persuasion is, can't listen to a person like that and listen to him today and say, what a load of crap. How can I possibly support him? But like Trump, they ignore that. If he is supporting or putting it to owning the libs, then they are willing to just forget anything he said and done in the past. And that kind of pisses me off.
Oh yeah. Well, it's like the old Looney Tunes, right? Like the coyote's running off the cliff, and as long as they don't look down, he's not going to fall. This is the mentality, and it sucks. And I have a lot of empathy for those people because regular Americans are fucking busy. You know, they have jobs. Sorry, I swore I didn't mean to do that, but they're busy. They have jobs. They need to pay their mortgages. They need to tend to their families and focus on their communities and be present in their own lives. They don't have time to go back and like logically purity test their own beliefs and the statements of every politician. So it's like the boiled frog, right? So, you know, they get to these points and you need something external to knock them out of that. And I think we have that, especially in the context of the Iran war. You know, you can want to own the libs all day. You can want to, you know, sneer at the blue-haired lefties, and that's fine. But when you see those caskets come rolling off that C-17 with the American flags draped over them, or men and women that died over there for nothing, when you see the videos of them pulling, you know, pieces of Iranian kids out of rubble because we hit a girls' school, I mean, Jesus Christ, this isn't political anymore. This ain't left, this ain't right, this ain't Democrat, this ain't Republican. This is American. It's an issue that we all bear responsibility in. They know it, I know it, and we all need to meet together in the middle right now to make sure stuff like this doesn't happen anymore and we have seriousness back in our government. That's the whole reason I'm in politics.
Well, and again, I agree with you, and I've said it in this, this conversation. I'll say it again: the average American doesn't have the time to look at that. Just what you're talking about. They're worried about putting a roof over their heads, food on the table, all the stuff we've already talked about. They don't really have the time nor the desire to do, as I do, and I'm sure you do, look at old videos of JD Vance and Kash Patel and all the other hypocrites that trashed Trump not too long ago and now are just his bootlickers. They don't have the time for that. And I understand that. They shouldn't. They have normal lives. They're not cuckoos like me that spend all their time studying this. So the thing is, people like yourself do need to call attention to that. And you are. that you need to be centrist. You need to focus on what they are concerned about, which is what we're talking about, the things the Democrats aren't doing, that they aren't concerned about. They're not going to win elections, Adam, and you know this, by just concentrating on the fringe, the very far left Democrats. A lot of people say, well, the Republicans won because all they do is focus on their core constituency, which is these rabid red meat Republicans. The Democrats need to do the same thing. They need to focus on the very extreme far left wing of their party. I think that's insanity.
Yeah, I think there's also a fundamental difference between the far right of the Republican side of the spectrum and the far left of the Democratic side of the spectrum. The further right you get, the more nationalistic, jingoistic, wrap yourself in the flag you become. The further left you get, I mean, there's a lot of people online that are fundamentally in the online left that are anti-American, that are actively harming even the Democratic Party. And that's because maybe it's a good thing, but there's a lionization. There's a value in individual thought, critical thought, being critical, skeptical of leadership that applies to that further left online. I think it's applied unfairly sometimes. I can think of a few major influencers, the Hassan Pikers of the world, for example, that I think are just anti-American to be anti-American, oppositionally defiant, with no real message behind it. But that principle of being skeptical of American leadership and American the decisions of the American government, it's a good thing. On the right, the further you get that way, there's a disincentive to critical thought. There's a disincentive towards heterodoxy, as we say. They get a talking point, they follow it, whatever the president says. There's less critical thought on that end of the political spectrum than there is on the left. But what that means is that there's more anti-American sentiment on one side versus the other. And trying to solve that math equation, bring both sides of those spectrums back to sanity, where the rest of us need to be in order for this country to function properly. I don't know exactly what the answer to that is, but I know I can talk to that right end of the spectrum better than a lot of people from the far end of the spectrum on the left. And I know I can empathize and validate the perspectives of those people on the left that would not otherwise be constructive, good faith partners in the Democratic Party. I want to do that. That is the challenge that I'm setting out to solve as part of my candidacy. And I think I'm already having mild success.
I couldn't agree with you more. I had a bunch of huge fights not too long ago with if you remember, the whole defund the police movement that came about. That was during the George Floyd murder and the ensuing chaos that happened after that. As a former police officer, that really upset me a lot. Because it's insane. I mean, so their answer to a tragic murder or tragic issue of violence carried out by just a very few police is to defund the police, to take away an entire police department or eliminate it in certain cities. Obviously, that's insane. And I was told, well, that's not really what you mean. No, I kind of know what the word defund means. You can couch it in whatever you want in semantics, but the point of the matter is you believe that money should be taken out of police budgets because they're all corrupt. They're all violent. That's insane. And you're right. I think when you get into the far left, not only are they more, I won't say all, but many of them anti-American at their core, they tend to not vote as much because they don't believe in the system. Whereas it's different with the far right. They are hyper voters. They will turn out. And I agree with you in many, many ways. I can relate better to far right MAGA supporters when I speak to them one-on-one than the very, very far left people, the fringe on the far left. And it all comes down to the same thing, Adam. We've got to meet in the center. And Democrats haven't been able to do that. I think, and I know candidates like yourself can and do want to do that. And let me move forward here in the time we have left, because there's so much to talk about. We're going to run out of time. One of the things that got me in the last few days is that the Department of Justice, the DOJ, and if I can read it here, the Justice Department moves to vacate January 6th convictions for the far right extremists, including this lovely, peaceful gentleman right here, who is Stuart Rhodes, who is the founder and leader of the Oath Keepers, one of the most vile and violent armed militias in America, and one of the militias behind January 6th. If you recall, this little peaceful tourist kumbaya episode that happened on January 6th. where there was absolutely no violence whatsoever, and all of the protesters linked arms with the Capitol Police and just sang songs around the campfire, as we all know.
So it was a guided tour, I believe.
It was a guided tour, and they were just peaceful tourists. And this was the tour guide. Anyway, the DOJ wants to not. They've already been pardoned by Donald Trump, as you know, which is just one more notch about him being a traitor. But now the Department of Justice wants to vacate their convictions, so there's not even any record of it at all. I won't go on and on because I think you know what I feel. Your thoughts on that?
It's a tragedy of American justice. It's a mockery of what our justice system is supposed to represent. I remember I was overseas, so I only entered the political sphere like 2 months ago, so 3 months ago. You're seeing me pretty rough and uncut coming into politics. Where I was before that for a long time was overseas working undercover in my previous job as an intelligence officer. So you can imagine the emotions that might come over me watching January 6th on television, far from the flagpole, out there putting my life on the line, the lives of other people that trust me in that work. And I'm putting their lives on the line for this to happen at our own capital. It was really scary. Like I don't know if people really remember. I understand the impulse to like block it out, but it was terrifying. The idea that we were having like a coup in our own government. I really thought that might have happened, and it almost did. Right? Had it not been for Cynic and all the other officers in there that deflected, they could have gotten their hands on lawmakers, and who knows what they would have done to Nancy Pelosi or
Hang
AOC
Mike
or
Pence. Remember that?
the vice president himself, right? And then Stuart Rhodes, when you showed his photo a little while ago,
Yeah.
that man went on InfoWars repeatedly in the lead up to January 6th and said exactly what he wanted to do. They were stashing guns over here on my side of the river. You know, I can see the Capitol from over by my apartment here.
Yep.
They were stashing guns over here for a quick react force just in case they needed them. Needed them for what, Stuart? I cannot understate when I talk to people about this, and I have had a few conversations on the streets with J6 deniers, essentially saying like, "Oh,
yeah.
it was nothing, it was whatever." If you want all the proof that there are bad actors within a system of otherwise low information voters that they're taking advantage of, go back and listen to Stuart Rhodes anytime he appeared on InfoWars in the lead up to January 6th. There was a roadmap, a plan, there was the anger, there was the direct fomenting. And when it happened, when they were in the Capitol with their little stupid outfits and their zip ties and everything else, the commentators online were cheering them on. The InfoWars were cheering them on. The guys up on Rumble and everything else were cheering them on. And you know who else was cheering them on? The super online left were out there saying like, well, this is what you get with the broken system. And you know what I wish I saw more of that day was just a somber understanding of like just how broken we had become as a country to even be in that position, and the monumental effort of Capitol Police and everybody else who pulled us back from that movement and saw that we didn't fracture further. We need to acknowledge that we came real close, and I don't want to get back there again. I don't think we have to either. If we can all just admit that we lost our minds for a while and meet in the middle.
You know, I hate to use the overused cliche, but for me and many, many, many millions of other Americans like yourself, that was the day the music died. I can't think in my lifetime anyway of a lower point in American history. And to add insult to injury, as you just mentioned, there are still January 6th deniers today who firmly believe in their heart of hearts that this was caused by the far left, by Antifa, or even worse, that this was an undercover episode or mission by the FBI, that all those
or the
people
CIA
were
or the deep state
or any,
whatever.
you name a three-letter agency, and they were behind this, that the far right had absolutely nothing to do with this whatsoever. It was it was a false flag by the left, period. And we never landed on the moon, and you know, on and on and on. Earth is flat.
And Sandy Hook was all, you know, child crisis actors. Yeah, no,
absolutely.
Yeah,
the fact that still is believed today, or is a belief today, makes me literally nauseous. But it's what we have to deal with, which is why folks like yourself, Adam, have to reach out to the 30% of America that are part of a cult. I've worked with cults as a police officer, not a lot. but it's almost impossible to break a cult. The only way you can ever possibly do it is to speak with them over a very long period of time. And even then, it's usually unsuccessful. But there are some that will break away. And at this point, that's all we can hope for. We've just got a few minutes left in this time. I would be remiss in not speaking about Iran. Obviously, we are at war. Even though it's now called, I believe it's a special military operation, or was that Putin? I'm not sure. Trump, Putin, I'm not sure. Interchangeable. But we're at war with Iran. We now have a blockade of the blockade. And the most recent information, if you can believe it, is that we had about 50,000 troops in the area, 3 major aircraft carrier task forces, thousands of Marines. And now, as of, I think, 2 days ago, the word is out that the Pentagon is sending 10,000 more troops there from, I guess, the 82nd Airborne, possibly the 10th Mountain Division, not sure, but 10,000 more troops. What do you think is going to happen there? I mean, are we in for I know you're not privy to confidential information, but are we looking at a ground war? Are we looking at airborne insertion? Are we going to seize all of the islands? I mean, in the next couple of weeks, Adam, what do you foresee happening in this war?
I think it's a sad reality that Trump chickening out on a ground invasion before. He sent that tweet, which was insane. It's the craziest thing that a president has ever said, right? On Truth Social, he put up that he was gonna murder an entire civilization. Obviously, excuse me, I don't think there was a very real possibility that he was going to use nuclear weapons on Tehran or anything like that. The man is fundamentally an idiot and probably doesn't understand what he's saying. But I do think that we walked back from a ground invasion that day. And I think the reason that probably happened is due to the bravery of some of our senior military officers that are still left in those ranks, the ones that haven't been cleaned out by Hegseth. Yeah, they probably told him, like, sir, there is a 0% chance of success on this, and there's a 100% of thousands of American casualties, dead on the beach, landing, whatever. I think that was enough to stall it out for then. And I think the kickback into this de facto blockade of a blockade of a blockade, I think that is our best hope, that no American kids are going to die on that beach. But I don't think that can hold. And I'm putting out a video on this today. If anybody's curious, get on the Instagram or the other socials. I've been doing some Iran war analysis, and my analysis, what I'm seeing for this conflict is essentially, it is an untenable situation to have Iran charging transit fees, just what it's going to do to the global economy. The reduction in production capacity due to the shutdown, the force majeure that was called by all of the oil companies in the area, all of the damage done to the infrastructure in other Gulf countries, even, is going to take years to rebuild. I mean, 3 to 5 years is the assess the rebuild time. What you're going to see is that prices are going to spike so high that any sort of margin on that is going to be untenable for the global market. And unless the Iranians are willing to back down from any of their maximalist positions on their weapons program, the nuclear program, or charging transit fees in Hormuz, or Americans are willing to accept 30, 40, 50, 100% more expensive services and goods and energy costs, then we're going to go back to shooting eventually. There's no way we won't. I don't know if I have confidence that, well, the Iranians definitely won't back down. This is existential for them, and it's not just a rational negotiation process. They have thousands of dead women and children. There's no way that they can walk back from their positions and still be legitimate in the eyes of their own people or themselves. And the Americans, our negotiating team is led by J.D. Vance, Jared Kushner, and Steve Witkoff, 3 people who have no business running a Burger King, let alone the U.S. government, and negotiating with foreign governments about the future that regular Americans are going to have to suffer for generations. It makes me angry. I don't see a solution that doesn't involve further military action. I really hope I'm wrong.
Couple of things on that. We could, of course, do an entire episode on that, and maybe we will in the very near future. I foresee, well, as a Marine, as a former Marine, what do you think the chances are that we're going to be forced into an interdiction with either a Chinese flagged vessel or an actual Chinese naval vessel that is escorting another vessel. What do you see the possibilities of that occurring?
I don't know. As a former Marine, Department of Navy, I got a lot of respect for America's Navy. I also have a lot of respect for America's captains. The men and women heading these vessels. There's a difference between a lawful order and an illegal order. And if they were to get one, to fire upon, to interdict, to do something that is not in keeping with the military code, I still believe that our military is strong enough to resist overreach and oversight. Now, that says nothing about accidents. And when you got, these heavily weaponized fleets circling each other, you have a lot of high value goods transiting, you have energy and infrastructure, energy goods that the entire world needs. You have a tinderbox that is just waiting to alight, and all it takes is the Russian spoofing a GPS signal, or another hostile actor, a terrorist group, even like commandeering a ship like this and false flagging an attack on us. All it takes is one tiny little spark for all of this to go up and suddenly become global conflict. And the one thing that people aren't talking about now with the U.S. Navy in the area in the Gulf is that those assets are now deployed and depleted in that area and are not available for, let's say, defense of Taiwan or air support to any other theaters that may open up in the future. We've sacrificed so much readiness, so much military capacity for nothing. The entire world is worse off. We are worse off as citizens and taxpayers at home. Our men and women are dead for nothing. And what do we got to show? Absolutely zero. It makes me so angry. And the fact that they can go, excuse me, that the members of this administration can go to a UFC fight and dance around and preen themselves in front of all of their Slavish supporters from the right-wing media space, it's disgusting. And I think even people within the right-wing media space, at least some parts of it, know that. They feel it. They understand how gross this is. I want them to come back with open arms, come back to sanity, and join the rest of us and put an end to this nonsense.
Adam, I'm going to ask you. I think we're going to go a little over an hour. Can you
Please.
stay for a few more minutes?
Please. Yeah, I'm having a good time.
Okay. Well,
Sorry. I know it's like all doom and gloom for me right now, but this is enjoyable. I promise.
No. This is critical stuff. I mean, that this is critical stuff right
Yes,
now. Sir. And I personally feel that you're one of the very best experts for a variety of reasons because of your background to talk about this. And hopefully becoming a member of Congress as well. As you know, Adam, the Iranians would not be able to be charging vessels, I think about 2 million per vessel to go through the Strait of Hormuz right now, if it hadn't been for the war, if it hadn't been for Donald Trump attacking Iran. They weren't doing that before. Now they are able to charge any vessels they want for passage through the Strait of Hormuz, $2 million per vessel. That's adding right to the coffers of Iran, the very thing that Donald Trump says he's trying to prevent, to cut off their revenue from oil. Okay, so maybe they're not getting as much oil out. They're actually taking it now from the ships directly. That's insane. That's all.
And it's quite literally piracy too. Let's not forget that.
Yeah, it is. It would be piracy too if we followed Donald Trump's original order, which is to not allow any ship to transit in or out of the Gulf, and then stop it on the high seas. That would be terrorism and violations of all kinds of international law.
The difference, I heard this the other day, the difference between piracy and maritime policing is the size of your Navy. That's the only difference.
Well, you mentioned a good point. You mentioned before spoofing. That's already happening. The vessel's already spoofing the signals. So the U.S. Navy doesn't know exactly what's going on. And several vessels have actually escaped or gotten out of the Gulf because of that. So that's already starting. Let me ask you, you mentioned it, so I have to follow up on this extremely important point. I have asked a number of guests here, senior military, retired leaders about this. What do you think, and be honest, Adam, and I know you are, so just answer me this. What do you think the chances are that a senior a commander, theater commander, on the spot commander would do if given an illegal order by the president? Not necessarily a genocidal order, just one that he or she knows is a violation of international and or the Constitution. What would they do?
I believe the the training, the time and grade, and the work you have to do to captain one of America's Navy's battleships, aircraft carriers, etc. The chain of command on those ships is tight, and they are real Americans. It's not a political appointment process. It's not one of these pipelines that are created by ideology. It's somebody who can do the job of wielding the kind of force, and is worthy of the awesome responsibility of that force. I have full faith in those captains. I don't see one of them exceeding brief, and I don't see one of them acceding to a request from Pete Hegseth or anybody else that goes against American values or strategic discipline, strategic military discipline. I just don't see it. I believe in them. I still believe in our military, and I believe in this country that like normal people would also react in horror if they knew about those types of illegal orders coming out too. I still think there is a moral core, both in our military and in our national soul. And I think that exists on the bridges of those ships, just like it does here at home. And what I will say is that Hegseth has been dismissing top generals with at the Pentagon in the last 2 months, 6 weeks since the war kicked off. Essentially, he dismissed the chief of the joint chief, right?
Yes.
He dismissed the head of the army. He dismissed the head of the chaplains. And I
All the
actually, as
senior
part of
JAGs too.
all the jags, yeah, no, he what he's doing is he's dismissing or forcing into retirement a lot of senior officers at the Pentagon, so that the Pentagon looks and thinks more like a Turning Points USA chapter, right? He wants his idea of what a military general is, regardless of competence. And it really confused me when he dismissed the head of the chaplains, because like, what did
Mm.
chaplains do to anybody, right? And I think that is indicative. It's like a microcosm of the entire mentality of this administration. The head of the chaplains, for anybody that doesn't know what a chaplain is, it's like military faith leaders. So you have priests and rabbis and whatever, chaplains, right? I think the reason that they target the chaplains in a moment like this is because they're targeting people of conviction. You know, if you have a faith structure, if you have values and morals, you are that much less likely to give in to unlawful orders or an orthodoxy of thinking that goes against fundamentally what you stand for. You know, so any independence of thought is not welcome in this Pentagon or in this White House, and they're going after it. It makes me really scared. But when it comes to the guys and gals deployed in the field, I still trust them. I know in my heart, or I believe anyway, that when it comes down to doing the right thing, that's in line with the values we claim to have, they'll do it.
But let me ask you this, Adam, and I hear you. What about when Trump said, he didn't do it yet, when he said he's going to order the U.S. military, whether it's the Navy, the Air Force, or both, to destroy every bridge and power infrastructure, energy infrastructure in Iran, to bomb them back to the Stone Ages? That is a war crime.
Yep.
What about the pilots or the commanders that would have given that order? Do you foresee that if that order still comes down the pike, that they would obey that?
Maybe. I mean, once you start getting into like sorties and like the mass application of these things,
It's rough.
possibly. But like, I know what that ready room looks like. I've been amongst pilots. A good friend of mine's a JSF fighter pilot. I know what these conversations are like, and I know these boys are good Americans. And if somebody were to lay out a map of Tehran and say, here's the power plant, here's all the bridges, we're doing war crimes today, boys. I don't see it. I just don't. I think you would have more resistance than support in that ready room. I think you'd have people slamming their ranks on the desk and resigning their commissions, refusing to do it. I think you would see the more honorable side of the military mindset come out in moments like that. I'm disappointed it didn't when Hegseth gave that ridiculous talk at the Pentagon a couple months ago, or last year. Sorry. I wish somebody had gotten up and slammed their stars on the board. I understand why they didn't. I'm glad they didn't. In a certain respect, we do need adults in the room in the military. But if it were to come down to an actual explicit stated plan to doing war crimes, I still believe in America's military more than that. They wouldn't do it. Not in my opinion.
I pray to God you're right. I agree with you. Until unless it happens, I agree with you. For folks that haven't been in the military at all, they can't understand how the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, morals, ethics, the Constitution is constantly drilled into members of the military, especially officers, those in command. That's just ingrained. It's part of the DNA from the very first day in the military. So I would hope that would happen. Let me ask you one more question on this, and then we will have to wrap it up, unfortunately. As a former Marine who also worked on land, not just sea, what about the other big question, in my mind anyway, and many Americans, about the deployment of ICE all over the country, and in some cases the National Guard, and in some other cases even the active duty military, in a couple of cases the U.S. Marine Corps, I think in Los Angeles. What about that on this specific question? Do you believe, and now we're talking about possibly National Guard, Reserve, and not military, ICE, who is not very well trained today, knowing what I know about the lack of training that's been going on with new recruits in ICE. What do you think the chances are that a commander on the ground of ICE or a National Guard unit that was ordered to shoot real bullets at protesters on the command of the local commander on the ground, do you believe, A, the commander would give such an order if ordered to do so by higher ups? And do you believe the rank and file soldiers and or Marines would carry out that order?
I again, for the military boys and girls, sorry, no, I don't think a Marine, even if under command of domestic law enforcement, given that order, I believe in our guys, and I just don't see it happening. Now, I will say, ICE officers, or the men and women who are in field deploy positions within ICE right now, yeah, I don't think there's the same level of training, the same level of discipline. In fact, we know there's not the same level of trigger discipline because we all watched Renee Good get shot in the face by a scared little boy with a pistol. I saw that. I saw Renee Good, and for those of y'all that didn't see the video, don't watch it. It's horrifying.
Yes.
She's in her car. She's trying to drive away. Man steps out and then draws on her while filming with his cell phone, like he was live streaming on Instagram, and blasts this lady for no reason. I think back to all the kids in Iraq and Afghanistan that I know were standing checkpoint being driven at by a V-bed and had
Yeah.
better trigger discipline than that officer right then because he might have got a boo-boo on his little toe. I have no empathy for an organization that puts that kind of irresponsibility on the street, kills American citizens, and then has their press secretary all the way up to the secretary of DHS lie for them, has the press secretary of the White House lie for them, has the president completely disregard the murders and act like they've never happened. That organization should not exist in the federal architecture anymore. ICE has to go. And you know what? I still have a lot of empathy in my heart for some of those ICE officers that signed up, right? They were given a gun and a flag on their shoulder and a cash bonus and told they were doing the right thing. That promise put an entire generation of kids like me in the war on terror. I do not begrudge anybody who took that out because they needed it economically for themselves or they believed they were doing the right thing. So I am all in favor of dissolving ICE as an entity, reforming, revetting, rehiring, and restoring some dignity to what it means to enforce an actual immigration policy. But if that does not come with full, like an actual reform of that immigration policy, we are doomed to repeat the same cycles. And I will not allow that to happen. When I get to Congress, this is top of my list.
When you talked about the horrible video of Renee Good, did you get a chance, unfortunately, to see the video of the VA nurse, the gentleman that was
Preddy,
killed
yeah,
as well?
Alex Preddy, yeah. Yep.
He was shot in the back of the head, I think 10 times. And I watched the video many times. He had already been relieved of his legally owned firearm when an ICE officer, as he was being held down, shot him in the back of the head. That's murder, which is why I have to ask that question. I'm not so sure, Adam, to be honest with you, that ICE officers would not carry out illegal orders to fire on innocent civilians if given an order to do so by a senior ICE officer well, not the military, by an ICE officer. I think it would happen.
Yeah, I'm fully concur on that one. Yeah, I think a lot of guys, not all, probably not even most, but there are a lot of people that specifically signed up with ICE to go torture immigrants and have authority over their fellow citizens specifically because they wanted it. And that's super scary. The ICE training pipeline is 47 days. You know why it's 47 days of training? because
Yeah.
Donald Trump is the 47th president. That's disgusting. I hate this. I
And
hate it.
almost no vetting at all. They're accepting people with criminal records. I can't tell you how many stories I've read about ICE officers being hired with minimal to no vetting that later were discovered to have violent records, including weapons violations and sexual assault and so forth. And they were already serving. This is who's on the street right now. And many of them made statements about how they really want to take it out on and I don't even say the word derogatory words about immigrants, Latinos. So no, I believe that ICE officers would in fact carry out illegal orders to shoot Americans on the street, citizens, non-citizens, just anybody. And I hate to say that that's where we're at, but that's about where we're at.
Yes, sir.
And I think I don't think we're out of time. I can't go over too much more, though I would like to. Adam, do you have any last thoughts for folks, especially in Virginia, but anybody watching this about the upcoming election, what's going on in Virginia, the redistricting, or anything else, Iran, or just any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'll give people my sign off pitch. Like, I know the way that I talk, and where I came from, I can sound very negative. I know there's a lot of doom and gloom right now, but there's still hope in this country. Iran is bad, but it'll end. The social division that we're all going through is bad, but it'll end. There will eventually be justice for these guys, these lunatics in the White House and everywhere else that broke our Constitution. But it starts with like getting engaged and active on your end. And candidacies like mine, I'm not the only one either. You need to go find the young up and coming candidates in your congressional races in these primaries in your states. Go support them. Send a donation or donate a few hours to help them campaign or digitally canvass, even if you don't live there. My campaign, if you like the way that I talk, you find value in what I'm trying to do. I'm at adam4congress.com, or you can hit our social media up at Adam Dunigan VA8. Get involved, and I have work for anybody that wants to do it. It's a service to the country at this point. I need donations, obviously, 5, 10, $20, anything that y'all can spare would help me go a long way to keep my campaign solvent as well, because I'm trying to keep my finance clean. But more than that, like, if you have questions, if you have anxiety about where our society is going or what you can do to stop it, send it my way. I'm happy to help you wrestle with that anxiety, because I'm going through it too. That's why I'm here in politics. And if I'm going through it, considering all the experience I have in the military and intelligence community and whatever, if I'm going through it, I can't imagine the fear that the average citizen must be feeling right now. If I can talk even one person through that and give them some reassurance that there's good people out there trying to do good in the world, then that'll make this campaign all worth it.
Adam Dunigan, Democratic candidate in Virginia's 8th congressional district. Thank you so much for joining us here today. And I'd love to have you back in the future if you're interested.
Absolutely, David. And we're going to get on that town hall, I promise you.
No, let's put a town hall together. I am as serious as a heart attack about doing that. So you keep in touch with me off air, and we'll put something together.
Yes, sir. Will do. Good talking to you, David. See you later, man.
Same here. And everyone else, thank you for joining us. And you take care, stay safe, and stay sane.